Insurance isn't our only passion at UFG Insurance. We're dedicated to supporting the communities where we live and work. We proudly offer our employees paid time off to volunteer. Their work is making a positive difference across the U.S. UFG's Go Beyond Award is presented to one employee annually for exceptional community service. Striving to deliver on our promises is more than what we do. It's who we are. For a company promising community support, think UFG.
All right, well, hello and welcome to Iowa Ideas. This is the Gazette's 9th year of hosting Iowa Ideas, an initiative that explores topics that are important to Iowans. We're excited for 2 days of discussions about the pressing issues facing Iowans. We're starting today and continuing tomorrow. I'm your moderator, Sarah Conrad-Baranowski, managing editor at the Gazette, and I'd like to recognize Iowa Ideas' presenting sponsor, ITC Midwest, and this session's sponsors, UFG and Cedar Rapids Bank and Trust. Thanks to them for making this session and Iowa Ideas possible. During our time together today, we'll talk with our panelists and address audience questions. If you have a question at any point during the session, you can type it into the Q&A box or in the Zoom chat, and our tech host, who's working behind the scenes, will forward it to me, and I will include it in the conversation. The topic of this panel discussion is how to foster community engagement. And to explore this topic, I'm joined by 4 panelists. They are Adam Lounsbury, Executive Director of Volunteer Iowa, Temwa Piri, Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Dubuque, Liesl Siebert, Program Manager at the Institute for Decision Making at the University of Northern Iowa, and Angelica Van Atta, Senior Manager of Community Outreach and Engagement at United Way of East Central Iowa. So thank you for joining us today. Our panelists represent or bring knowledge of a variety of ways that Iowans can engage with their community. So I want to start today's conversation by setting the stage with them. I'll ask each of them to share how in their work they help Iowans engage or work with Iowans who are engaging in their community. We're going to start with Adam, and then we'll move on to Temwa, Liesl, and Angelica. But you don't have to remember the order. I can go over that as we get to each one. So Adam, if you want to start off and tell us a little bit about how you engage with Iowans or help them engage.
Sure. Well, I literally have the coolest job. It's really all my job is Executive Director of Volunteer Iowa. Our mission is to improve lives, strengthen communities, and foster civic engagement through service and volunteering. So from being lead agency supporting volunteers in time of disaster, grant programs designed to bring volunteering and service in Iowa. We also administer all the AmeriCorps programs, oversee over 1,000 Iowans serving in a multiple capacity in that program, and the core program for RSVP and local mentoring programs that leverage nearly 100,000 volunteers and stuff. On a personal level, I coach and volunteer locally in Van Meter, Iowa, and began my service journey 31 years ago with Iowa Conservation Corps rebuilding Iowa after the floods of '93.
What do you coach? We'll just follow up there.
I used to coach youth football and soccer, and I still coach soccer. So.
All right. So we'll move on to Temwa. You're next.
How's it going, everybody? And I'm just really excited to be here. So again, Temwa Piri, Community Engagement Coordinator with the City of Dubuque in the Office of Economic Mobility and Neighborhood Support. Super long name and title. I usually have a satchel so I can just remind everybody as I walk around. But as a community engagement coordinator, I get the awesome opportunity of being out in our community, connecting with residents, building relationships. And that I do that in multiple different ways. One of them is through our City Life program, as well as with our neighborhood associations. But a little background about myself. Prior to working with the city, I worked with the Dubuque Community School District for 6 years with at-risk youth. So that really gave me a great opportunity of getting out in the community and also connecting. And so just building on those relationships as well. And right now, my hobbies and free time is with my 2 boys and my fiance and our cat. So he might end up making an appearance sometime later.
Perfect. I think post-COVID and Zoom life, we're all used to that. So that sounds great. All right, Liesl, you're next.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Liesl Siebert, again with UNI Institute for Decision Making. And in that role, I work a lot with boards and committees and volunteers at that level. Also very engaged in leadership development across the state, have been part of the group that has brought the Leadership Exchange event for the last 6 years, bringing together leadership programs. So I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's really about kind of building that pipeline of leadership and getting those volunteers to step up. And then a little bit on the personal level, get some volunteer opportunities as well with the Alzheimer's Association Iowa chapter, and also Keep Iowa Beautiful. So a few different outlets there, learning a little bit about what that engagement looks like.
Great. And then Angelica.
Yes, hi. Thank you, everyone. It's so great to be here this afternoon. I am the Senior Manager of Community Outreach and Engagement at United Way of East Central Iowa. I promise I did not pay the sponsors to put volunteers wearing United Way Day of Caring shirts in the video that played beforehand. But as you can see, we're very involved in volunteer engagement and helping businesses offer that opportunity to their employees. So there are a couple of different areas that I focus on through United Way. One of them being Day of Caring, which is a community-wide single day of service where over the last several years, we've increased to about 1,600 volunteers community-wide that are all out on one day. I also facilitate our Workplace Volunteer Council, which is a coalition of member organizations who are interested in making sure that their staff are volunteering in the community. And then two other programs, our Board Orientation Leadership Development Program, just helping train individuals who are interested in serving on boards and committees. And then finally, our Civic Circle discussion series. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. A little bit, I guess, on the personal side for me, I do serve on the board of the Freedom Foundation, also a precinct chair for the Lynn County Election Office. I've also chaired the Marion Civil Rights Commission. And I also have 3 grandkids, 2 of whom started kindergarten this year, which is part of the reason why I'm also running for school board in my community. So that's what I got.
We have so many very engaged people on this panel, which is not a surprise at all. But it's good to see a variety, and I kind of want to get into that next. So let's discuss what civic engagement looks like. It's not just volunteering or serving on a commission. It can be a lot of different things, and maybe we can kind of set the stage by going over what those things are. And Angelica, can you maybe share with us some of the different types of civic engagement?
People say it's a big difference. It's a big impact to the community. But for me, it's really how we show up and participate in community. It's the individual actions that we take. That could just be within your neighborhood, within the greater community, the state, or nationally. But I think oftentimes we immediately think of volunteering, which is obviously very important, but also with a framework that we use for our Civic Circle program, we talk about 9 different types of civic action, and I won't rattle them off, but you can certainly go to United Way East Central Iowa's website to learn a little bit more about each of those different types of civic engagement, but I did want to highlight some more non-traditional ones. So obviously staying informed about local, state, and national issues and making sure that you vote, advocating for certain causes that are important to you. I love to hear Liesl having volunteered for the Alzheimer's Association, because in a past life, I worked for the Alzheimer's Association. And that was really one of my favorite parts. And then I think just other things like how you spend your philanthropic dollars, where do you donate other items and things like that. So I think I mentioned using your voice as well. So those are some of the other ways that we can talk about fostering that community engagement. So I think it's really about being an active participant in the world around us.
There's a weird audio, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has anything going on in the background or running that might be causing audio. It was really hard for me to hear some of that. Oh, Tim, I think it was you.
Does that sound better when I do that?
Yeah, it went away when you muted. I'm sorry. It might just be a feedback thing. So I don't know if you're comfortable unmuting when you want to talk. Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks. we deal with tech issues sometimes on Iowa Ideas, and it's all about rolling with whatever happens. But thanks, Angelica, for sharing those different ways. And I didn't want to quiz you and say, can you name all 9 of them? But
I do have a cheat sheet though, so I can name all 9 of them.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Go
So
for it.
yeah, so it's listen and learn. So basically, listen to other people's voices and perspectives and experience. Vote, service, volunteer, purchase power, donate, work, social entrepreneurship, which is really quite unique, and using your voice. So advocating. So those are the 9 different types of civic muscles that you can flex.
But I didn't want to give you a hard time or anything, but I think some people think that they're not engaged in their community, or that they don't have time, or they don't have the power or the ability to do it. And that kind of shows that even with purchase power, like, we're probably all doing something to engage civically in some way in our community. So
yeah. Well, and I think sometimes we assume that we have to do these really big things to make a dramatic impact, but it can be these everyday smaller actions as well that cumulatively can make an impact. So you're right. I don't know that many of us assume things like, where do you spend your disposable income? What types of restaurants do you patronize? That sort of thing can really make a difference as far as, being more active in your community.
Yeah. Adam, I want to go to you in your position with Volunteer Iowa, your great job that you have. You have this view of the current state of volunteering in the state. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's looking, who's getting involved, who's not involved? Like, I feel like in Iowa Ideas a couple of years ago, we were talking about still the effects of COVID, and I don't know if that's still an issue for volunteering, but could you give us kind of an overview, or what does it look like right now?
Sure. It's definitely a period of highs and lows. As you mentioned, during COVID, we saw a historic low of volunteering, actually the lowest level we've ever recorded, which kind of makes sense. And it wasn't just an Iowa thing, it was done nationally, but that meant tens of millions of dollars worth of labor lost to our communities and local charities. In fact, in the height of COVID, we had to deploy AmeriCorps members and Iowa National Guard to local food banks and pantries to make up the shortfall to ensure Iowans had access to food. So, and which in fact cost millions of dollars to deploy to make up that shortfall. So it just kind of demonstrates in one single issue area kind of where that what's lost. But the bigger drops during COVID were amongst what we saw from the data after the fact was the biggest decreases were amongst women and in smaller urban and micropolitan communities, particularly college towns. Male volunteer rates didn't drop quite as much. In fact, in some areas, it actually went up, largely because men typically volunteer more in outdoor areas and probably dumber than women in a lot of areas that in terms of volunteering. And we don't, yeah, I'll leave it at that. By 23, our numbers actually went back up above 2019 levels, so pre-COVID, and in fact were the highest ever recorded that we've had in Iowa. So not only did we rebound, we rebounded to the highest levels ever. And what we saw was that not only did men keep volunteering at a higher clip, but women came back and volunteered at the same higher rate, and some of the other populations that had kind of picked up some slack in certain areas as older volunteers decreased, younger volunteers increased, and that rate continued to be at a higher rate for the most part. Last year, we did see a slight decrease. We went from 57.3% during that high water mark compared to that 40% rate that was during COVID to we're kind of leveled at 53.2, but that's still above 2019 levels, which was 52.9%. So still at a high rate of volunteering. And since 2019, we've seen the biggest gains. I mentioned men at a higher rate they went up about 2.8%. We had African-American volunteer rate went up, had the biggest jump, 9.3% more volunteering since 2019. Gen X and millennial volunteers are up about 4.8%. Low-income Iowans volunteering at a 6.2% higher rate than they were in 2019. The biggest decrease was 18 to 24, with an 8.5% decrease among our youngest, kind of that college age volunteer. And actually, affluent Iowans are volunteering at a lower rate than they were in 2019. Rural rates are also higher. Rural communities rely on volunteers more as they have less paid staff to do many community functions like city clerks and things like that. But they have a higher rate overall, 55% compared to urban, 52.5. But I will note that the urban volunteer rate in Iowa is amongst the highest in the country. So even at 52.5, that's extremely high for urban volunteer rates. And we also know that volunteers, so the healthier you are, the more likely you are to volunteer, but also the more likely you are to volunteer, the more healthy you are, both physically and mentally. So we have, there's a strong correlation there with health.
And as a follow-up, what counts as volunteering when you're counting who's volunteering?
So for the purpose of this study, it's both formal volunteer roles like, being a mentor or being, where you have a position description, all of those things, but also it's survey data. So have you helped your neighbor? Have you worked, to do anything that's helping somebody else or helping your community? There's a national study that we also use that data. They have an informal and formal volunteer, and informal includes things like attending a meeting or things like that, which we don't think, well, that's civic engagement. It's not what most people think of as volunteering. So we do an Iowa study through the behavioral health assessment that kind of helps us wean that out a little bit better.
You brought up the sort of the economic impact of volunteering. And as a follow-up, I think probably a lot of people heard about the AmeriCorps funding being removed and now being restored. And I assume you know quite well, well, you administer that, or Volunteer Iowa administers that. So you understand the impact of that. But could you put that in some perspective? Like, what impact did that have on Iowa? How reliant are we on volunteers and on the AmeriCorps program?
Yeah, so we are particularly very pleased to say that Iowa is the only state in the country that did not lose a single AmeriCorps program because of these cuts. So, we've been blessed with very strong bipartisan support of service and volunteerism. And, there was a commitment at the state level to make sure that we weathered the storm and we would do what we could to keep programming alive. Also kind of hopeful that these programs would be restored. So we moved resources, helped programs using things like the Iowa National Service Corps, which was kind of a unique piece of legislation that we have here in Iowa that created a framework that allowed us to at least keep some of our programs alive at a kind of a skeleton level, to hit core functions, things like summer camps and, that parents were already signed up their kids for, that were run by AmeriCorps members that that just couldn't shut down on a dime. We did lose a lot of things like, our conservation work. Luckily, we didn't have any major disasters. We would have we would have had a lot harder time responding to those disasters this summer. But we were able to keep them alive, and then back with our new program year starting in August, we were able to keep to fully fund program all 24 of our local AmeriCorps state programs across the state to keep them. But there's 1,000 AmeriCorps members serving through that program. On average, the average AmeriCorps member leverages about 24 volunteers, so they either manage or support 24 additional volunteers through their roles. So losing, if those cuts would have been permanent, that would have been 345 AmeriCorps members were cut through those through that process. Would have had a big trickle effect. But yeah, overall, our programs leverage and support over 100,000 volunteers in Iowa.
Huge. All right. I would like to explore the topic of funding and its effect on engagement and volunteering a little bit more. Angelica, could you talk a little bit about how funding to nonprofits affects volunteering? Does it mean more if a nonprofit loses funding, are they going to have more volunteers step in, or their existing volunteers give more time to kind of cover that? Or I guess just if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe there was an Iowa Ideas session earlier talking about how the impacts of funding for nonprofit organizations. And essentially, it's a trickle down effect, right? So the nonprofits themselves may not have the same funding to administer certain programs or to pay staff or do marketing or recruitment of volunteers. And so, some of the work that they do is harder to do, and we continue to do as much or more with less. So to your question on, do we need more volunteers? I mean, I feel like the answer is always yes. We could always use that support. At the same time, though, there may not be the staff capacity to manage and support the volunteers, because the last thing we want to do is just, send a volunteer out and hope and pray that they do the things that we ask of them to do without any oversight. So there is a bit of a catch-22 when we have funding cuts. But yeah, I mean, we always need those volunteers. I think going back to the idea of civic engagement and community engagement, though, that's where we definitely need to see an increase in philanthropy and donations, in-kind donations and things like that, because certainly any types of budget cuts are going to compound the stressors that the nonprofit community or sector is already facing.
And I'm guessing that some depending on what role you're volunteering in, you may be asked to do more or take on new duties or give in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe Liesl will speak to this with the programs that she delivers as well. But we often will see board members of some of those smaller grassroots type nonprofit organizations who are then expected to do more than what they had done in the past. So I think part of the work that we do is just to make sure that incoming board members, commissioners, committee members, et cetera, understand what the expectation is of them, but also that those things can change on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis.
Yeah, great segue to Liesl. Yeah, do you want to comment on that first before I get to another question for you?
I can just piggyback off of that. That's kind of exactly what we're seeing. And some of the nonprofits, not all, but some nonprofits, if they are happy to make some budget cuts, they are maybe transitioning an advisory board to a working board. And so, yes, as Angelica said, it's working on what those expectations look like and being more strategic maybe in those board members that you're bringing on to make sure that they can maybe fill some of those gaps that you're seeing from those budget cuts that you had to make as an organization. So, yeah.
So, and your advice is, I guess the Institute for Decision Making comes in and helps organizations kind of make that structural change, or?
Yes, we do that kind of board training where, or it sometimes can start as an organizational strategic planning where you decide, what is our capacity as the staff, and then determine, do you have the resources to be able to outsource, or does your board need to maybe help if these things are a necessary component of what you're wanting to do as an organization moving forward? And then we also can do, some board training on what that might look like as far as best practices and templates and things like that. I mean, we're all about you don't have to recreate the wheel here. Like, all of the resources are out there. So it's really just sharing from each other, being collaborative with your region and area, other nonprofits, and kind of sharing the load a little bit.
Have you seen them, I'm assuming maybe this is a stupid question, but have you seen them do that as funding has changed, especially this year, like looking at what the other organizations are doing and saying, okay, well, you also lost some funding and you're restructuring in this way or doing this differently? I would think that they kind of lean on each other or learn from each other.
Yes, we are seeing that. Sometimes on a small capacity where maybe personally, a group that I'm in, they are not going to be receiving state funding anymore. And that was a big chunk of their budget. So working to have more of a working board. Other times we're seeing entire economic development organizations being defunded. And then regionally, there some of the bigger regional economic development organizations are maybe expanding to help provide resources to that region that is now without that kind of point organization. So there's different solutions as far as how we're trying to think about solving or filling the gaps of some of these budget cuts until things, maybe there's a new normal. We don't know what that's going to look like, but trying to make it work moving forward.
Yeah. So I want to stick with you, Liesl, because we heard from Adam kind of the differences between like women and men volunteering, or younger people and older people. But there's also a difference in volunteering between people who live in rural areas or small towns and people who live in cities or suburban areas. Could you talk a little bit about what some of the unique challenges are associated with civic engagement in rural areas and small towns?
Sure. Absolutely. And so I have worked quite a bit just in this role, but also previously I managed the Empower Rural Iowa initiative. So have worked extensively in rural areas. And of course, obviously the first issue is population, right? You've got just fewer people to even pull into your volunteer network. So you tend to have even more people wearing all of the hats. There is a lot of passion and pride there, but also burnout. And there's also a little bit of this humility that is probably everywhere in Iowa, but definitely in the rural areas where people don't see themselves as the leaders because they maybe don't have that title or something. So sometimes there's a hesitancy to step up into these kind of roles and do some of this work. So, and we see that a lot in our kind of rural communities where sometimes it just takes that ask to get someone involved, to empower them with the ability to step forward. But we definitely do see the challenge of more and more burnout, I would say, recently. And I think some of it, and it's interesting to hear Adam's stats on that kind of younger college age, it's how do we get them involved too, so we can create this bench of future leaders in every area, but definitely in our rural areas.
Have you seen where that has worked well? Like, the title of this is How to Foster Community Engagement. So have you seen where that works? Like, what works to build that, passion for being involved?
Well, I am a big proponent for leadership programs. So a little bit on my soapbox about the leadership programs. I mentioned the Leadership Exchange event, which started as an annual convening of leadership program managers, bringing them together to share information, what's working, kind of commiserate on the challenges. And also we partnered that with a boot camp to launch new leadership programs. But in the past few years, it has become a little bit more general. We still have very much a program kind of random sessions that are very much around leadership programs, but the rest are about leadership development in general. People are very passionate about this space, and we have found that, and it again is anecdotal because people are really not great at keeping records of their alumni, but anecdotally, communities who have robust leadership programs are able to then have kind of this network of people who know how the systems work, who know what the opportunities are in their communities, and feel more comfortable being able to kind of consider, being on the library board, or even maybe applying or considering council. It can be different levels depending on people's interests, but at least they have an awareness. So big fan of the leadership programs. Also really a fan of young professional groups. So I'll throw out Clear Lake's JC's group. I have talked to a few people who are part of that organization, and they really found a strong network there. We're able to kind of not just, it's a combination of belonging in especially rural areas, but also you meet other people and you kind of learn what other opportunities are out there, and you start to see where you can maybe plug in beyond just your normal 9-to-5 job. So programs like that, we also see a lot of success. And then from the more traditional volunteer route, there is the kind of the PACT program that's down in Appanoose County, where they have really looked at their volunteer structure to know what their different categories of volunteers want. And we've been talking about that a lot at rural convenings lately on, hey, it's important to know, like, the high schoolers, they really like like stickers. So they are motivated by a sticker. But so you have to figure out what the motivation is to get people involved at where they're at, and then be able to plug them in a little differently. So it's being more intentional than just throwing out on Facebook, we need volunteers for this event, or we're looking for a committee member. It's being really smart about how you are attracting people and inviting people.
And not inviting just the same people every time, because then you get to that burnout.
Yes.
If I could interject too, I just want to piggyback off a little bit of what Liesl was talking about with the leadership programs. Also a very big fan. And I mentioned that we do a board orientation leadership development program. But one of the things that we've done here at United Way is take some of our flagship programs like Bold and Civic Circle, which we typically will deliver to quote unquote professionals or some of our corporate partners, and reframed the same outline and curriculum for college students. And so we're really wanting to engage with them while they're in school, in hopes that they will plant their roots or keep their roots here post graduation, and then nurture those roots. But also, one of the things that Liesl was talking about with finding that connection with other people and building your network, we hope to do that then for the college students. And, in Cedar Rapids, we have 2 major universities or colleges, and then our community college. So we're pulling from Mount Mercy, and Kirkwood. And we're also, with those programs, the Bold program, we've got students from each of those 3 schools that go through a cohort together. So not only are we introducing them to members of the community, but we're also hosting classes on campuses so that, someone from can attend Mount Mercy's campus and vice versa. And then when we do our Civic Circle program in the summer months, we've got students that are typically from Cedar Rapids. They're interning over the summer at a local business, but then, they're attending different colleges and universities. And we piloted that program for the first time this year, and it's really been incredible to I still have some connections with them. Some of them have stayed on with their internships, but it's great to see that they have continued to stay engaged. And some of them, because it really wasn't something that was top of mind for them as far as volunteering or being involved in the community, have really, they've said that their eyes have been open to what all the opportunities are. And they've started to explore things that maybe they would not have had they not interned at a certain organization that happened to be piloting a program with us.
And those are people who are from this area who probably, it's not a new community for them.
Yes. When we do Bold, sometimes it is. I'd say almost all of them are Iowans or from the Chicago, Illinois area. But, no one from Washington State is coming.
Yeah. I just, I think just in my journalism life have reported on, and I've gone through these leadership programs in cities where I'm in the class with someone who has lived in that town their whole life, and they're like, wow, I didn't even know that this existed, or that this was an opportunity. And you kind of think about it as well, but you've lived here, but you kind of live in your own little bubble unless you get out. So I want to bring Temwa in because we're talking about these city programs, and you lead a city program that's like this. So could you talk a little bit about what Dubuque is doing to promote civic engagement? And it seems like a lot, so I'll just let you kind of go down the list and explain everything that you're doing there.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to give a shout out to a couple of the other organizations. Again, the things that we do is all about that partnership planning and people, right? So it's all about building those relationships. And some of the programs that we have is I went through a leadership Dubuque, and I mentioned that because it was an opportunity for me to actually find out what other businesses are within the community, because I've been in Dubuque for some time, and I thought as if I knew everything. And so when I went through that program, I was like, wait a minute, we have this many businesses, we have this many organizations in the community. So that also, that what was mentioned, is opening up your eyes of there's so many possibilities, there's so many opportunities to get engaged. Another one was Distinctively Dubuque. And so that's more for newcomers that you've come to the area. It's a great way for you to connect with also other newcomers, build relationships. You get to hear from speakers, and you also get to explore as far as the community. So again, a lot of great opportunities for people to get familiar with the community and see what's out there. But one of the programs that I have a privilege of being able to work with is called City Life. And so I mentioned it earlier, but it's an opportunity for community members, for residents to take tours with our city facilities, our departments, ask questions. And it's all about being hot, honest, open, and transparent. And so it's a great way for them to actually see the behind the scenes, but it's not really behind the scenes, but it's behind the scenes. So in that too, what we are really passionate about is building that relationship between our residents and also our city department. So they're actually having that political capital. And then within that program, they're also building their social capital, as well as mentioned, of the relationships amongst each other. And so just a great way for people to want to stay even more connected to the community, because they're getting that education on how they can actually make a difference. And so one of those other ways is through boards and commissions. So we really talk a lot about for individuals being the change that they want to be within the community, right? And so boards and commissions are a great way for people to get involved, to volunteer their time and make a huge impact within our community. And so another aspect with that is that program is offered twice a year. And so we have it in the spring and we also have it in the fall. But through building relationships and partnerships, we've also now expanded that not only just for the general community, but also with our youth. And we partner with our IJAG, which is Iowa Jobs for American Graduates. So we offer the City Life program with them. And one of the coolest things that I heard was some students were like, why should we go to this? It sounds boring. We're going to be talking about government stuff or whatever. And when they actually came to the program, they took the tours, they were super excited, and they were sharing that that they wish that they had more time of being able to connect with other departments that we have. So a great way for them to just see how they can get civically engaged. That one is through work-based learning, so the employment opportunities. But we do also promote the boards and commissions, because you can be 18 and serving. Through our program, actually, we were able to have some college students that have actually served on boards and commissions because of the relationship that we're building for them, experiencing city life and seeing that, wait a minute, I can do more even while I'm in college. So that's just one big program that we do, City Life, and I can talk more about also neighborhood associations, which is another aspect of what I get to do.
I had one follow-up question. What are some of the behind the scenes things that people get to see? I just am really curious, what kinds of things do you show them that, if you could give some examples.
Yeah, so if we take a tour, say, over at the Water Resource Recovery, you're able to just learn a lot more about how the anaerobic digester, how that whole process kind of works. When things come in, you visually see that versus kind of driving by and wondering, where does everything kind of go? So that's the behind the scenes that you kind of get. With Public Works, you get to see the different vehicles. We talk about the budget. We talk about whatever it is that the residents, the community members want to necessarily know and ask. So we give overviews of the department, and then we go a little bit more in depth with those tours of getting them to actually see what some of the services and what they look like.
Is there a way for you to measure success of that program? Like people who have completed that program and then do go on to serve on boards and commissions?
Yes. So with our city clerk department, if anybody applies for their for a board and commission, they have an opportunity on the application to check off if they went through the City Life program. So it's a good way for us to kind of track and see if what the impact of our program has been, as well as while we're in the program, talking with people a lot about the boards and commissions. We have physical applications where they can fill it out right there, and then we can get that submitted as well too.
Has that helped with the ability to fill these boards and commissions? Have you seen the effects of that?
It has. So this year we had our City Life. We changed it up a little bit. So we worked with our young professionals, and we did with our Dubuque Forward and some interns with Cottingham and Butler. And we have seen an increase as far as applications going towards the boards and commissions. So.
And You didn't mention this, but I think full disclosure, we all had a meeting beforehand to plan this.
Sure.
But I think is that the program you offer in multiple languages also?
Yeah, so what's really important when it comes to our city council is us being able to offer our services and everything else to the whole community, right? And so through that, we look at the data and see who's maybe missing when it comes to representation on our boards and commissions or other positions. And then we work to build those relationships. So in the past, what we've done is been able to have our City Life program in Spanish. And so that wasn't us necessarily just saying, hey, we're going to have it in Spanish and then we're going to build it the way that we want to. We met the community where they're at. We asked questions as to what departments would, how do we really craft this to where it's actually more engaging for the community. So we've been able to offer it in Spanish, and we've also been able to offer it in Marshallese as well.
And you've seen good response from that, like the classes fill up and there's a demand.
Yep.
That's awesome. Are there other languages you're thinking about offering it in?
Yeah, we're continuing to look at the data and also, again, those relationships, because what we don't want to do is just assume like, hey, we're going to do it for this demographic or whatever without them actually being included in those conversations. So that's a continual thing that we're working on who else can we engage or what's the data telling us and how do we use that to create our next program sessions.
Have you had anyone, sorry, I'm just really fascinated at this program.
Go for it.
Have you had anyone who's gone through City Life who's then run for office, like a local office?
I would have to look at our past numbers, not that I'm aware of right away, but we have had participants that have then gone into positions with neighborhood associations and leadership roles.
Okay, and I cut you off earlier. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to answer your question. I have had someone go through one of my programs, specifically the Civic Circle, and have run for a local office because of the program itself.
Do you think it kind of demystifies the whole process and government and?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why someone would choose not to run for elected office. But one of the major ones is they don't know really where to start. So to your point, I do think it demystifies everything. But it also encourages people and motivates and inspires them to be like, you know what, I can do this, just through some of the discussions that are a part of the program. But what I've also seen is that colleagues or peers who have gone through a program and then again, like later on have run for elected office has inspired someone else in another program. And it kind of becomes this full circle moment where other people see individuals taking these next steps that maybe perhaps they were tentative or maybe tepid, I guess, about taking those steps. But
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I agree with that also, because you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes it's a scary thing of being able to step into, even if it is like a boards and commissions, you don't know necessarily what that looks like. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of work, a challenge that you may not be qualified to do so. But really, it's about finding the board and commission that you are most passionate about. But in that program, you're getting an opportunity to learn a little bit more. You're hearing some stories. You get to see or engage with some people that might be participating in that. And that gives you that, oh, wow, okay, I can do this. I am passionate. This is where my passion is. And I do want to serve in this capacity.
Tamo, I think I cut you off earlier. You were going to talk about the neighborhood associations that you're also a part of.
Yeah, so I am super excited. I get to work with our neighborhood associations. We have a lot of passionate individuals that want to make a difference right where they live. And this is a great way to, if there's levels to it, right? And one of the ways that you can serve is right there in your neighborhood. And so a lot of our associations, they're sparked now because people just want to get to know their neighbors. I think post-pandemic, it's been some time for people to actually get to know each other, because most people will come home, just drive right into their garage, and you may not ever know who your neighbor is, right? And now with the associations, they're mobilizing, they're connecting with each other, they're talking with each other as to what goals or what things do we want to accomplish within our neighborhood. And through our department, what we've been able to create is a toolkit which helps kind of create that structure. Going back to, if you have somebody that's been in leadership for some time and they're looking to maybe pass on the reins, like this is a great way to kind of help with that, with the toolkit that we created. But it's also a great way for the associations to communicate with other people. It's like, hey, we're not just meeting just to meet for no reason. Like, here's what we want to do, and we want to hear from you also. What do you love? What do you enjoy about the neighborhood, and what else can we kind of do together to build community?
We have a question from the audience, and it is, how are you building trust and cultivating relationships with partners and community members right now? Anyone is welcome to answer that question, but I don't know if someone feels like, Temo, I know you didn't talk specifically about trust, but I imagine that inviting people into the city departments and letting them see the behind the scenes, it's not really behind the scenes, really does build trust. Like, here's how we're spending your tax money. We're not just taking it and pocketing it.
I mean, I think for us, it's just about being transparent. And then we also bring in a lot of different community partners and nonprofit organizations and ask people to observe board meetings and things like that. So I think it's just being very transparent helps to build some of that trust. So, I mean, I guess that's one way.
Yeah. There was a comment earlier about finding your passion, and I wonder if we could talk just for a few minutes about how you figure out what your passion is. If you are not already involved in something in your community, how do you go about figuring out where to put your time and your energy and your dollars? Like, is there a process you can follow? I don't have this one for anyone specific, but anybody feel free to jump in.
I was going to share also, we do have a website that's called Volunteer DBQ. So it's got a lot of great opportunities throughout the community to serve and opportunities to serve. And so with our Office of Community Impact, we have our community service and outreach coordinator, Brittany Hayes, who does some amazing work of going out there and talking with residents on ways that they can serve, sharing of what other organizations are kind of placing out there as far as opportunities, but then also being able to track that of the impact that they're making, because they can create a profile that stays with them as they're looking at different opportunities and serving. And then there's a cool little part of it where it equates the hours that are served with also dollar amounts, right? So then you can see just the amount of impact that you're making within your community. And I also have to throw out with like HACAP, one of the things when it comes to partnership, right? We have the VITA program, which is the Volunteer Income Tax Assistant Program. And so it's a great way to provide free tax service to the community. But in that partnership, we get to work to find volunteers to be in those roles, but those that are impacted by it, they remember that. They remember that. And as they their circumstances change or whatever, that they can find that this is another opportunity maybe I could serve of being able to help in this kind of capacity.
Yeah, that sounds great. I love being able to see the dollar amount of how much. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How to find your passion is the question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you framed it that way, because I often say that there's a few of us that are kind of like true volunteer nerds, and they usually work here, but for the most part, people care about an issue. They care about something. They're passionate about the environment. They're passionate about animals. They're passionate about their community. They're and at the end of the day, volunteering and service is a realization of that passion. So whatever you care about, whatever is important to you, start with that, and then see what ways there are to impact that. And Temo mentioned, the city of Dubuque, or the Volunteer Dubuque. That aggregates up into the statewide website, volunteerio.org. That all, we have local sites across the state that are all part of that network of local volunteer hubs. So whether you come to it from the state of Iowa one or the local one, there are thousands and thousands of volunteer opportunities. You can sort by issue area. You can sort by those types of things to find that volunteer opportunity. So there's a lot of ways to get involved through that.
And I just wanted to piggyback off what Adam said, because it is hard to quote unquote identify your passion. I think we all get that asked all the time of us or when we are facilitating programs. And I usually try to rephrase it and ask them, I will say, what's important to you? What do you care about? But I also say, what keeps you up at night? What wakes you up in the morning? How do you spend your free time? Those are the 3 areas you can start with, and then start to talk to other people that are involved in XYZ, and then start to explore, utilize the resources that Volunteer Iowa has. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't share, we have the exact same website. And so, all of our partners in the throughout our service area are included on that website. And honestly, it could just be spending a little bit of time on the website to see who the nonprofit organizations are, what are the opportunities to volunteer, and then I think the last piece, I guess I did say to talk to others, but, put it out into the world, put it out in the universe. I guarantee you someone is going to meet someone who is like, you know what, Liesel, meet Adam. They are both passionate about high school football. Why don't you check to see if there's something there that you could be an assistant coach? But yeah, I think just opening up and sharing that with other people is a good way to start.
I see a lot of people today that, they're mad about something too, or they see a problem in our society and they go online and they maybe go on social media and rant and rave and all of this stuff, instead of thinking about how do I make a difference and how do I impact that, and instead of a positive way the volunteering and service is a means to make a difference and be a part of the solution instead of just another voice complaining.
And I would like to also add, Angelica, I love what you were talking about, of just talking about and sharing that. If you're part of a volunteer opportunity, sharing that with other people. And if you're looking to get started, I think a great way is asking friends and family or people that are close to you, is like, where do you see me maybe potentially serving, right? Nothing is permanent, right? So if you start with something and then it's like, it's not really maybe where I thought I would be going, you can always, have another opportunity. But again, that gives you another great self-awareness of like, I thought this might have been it, and I served and I did what I could and made an impact, and now maybe moving on to the next thing. So I serve on the Avery Foundation as a board member. And so what we focus on is being able to help families that are impacted by cancer. And so we have a grant that families are able to apply for to help with that financial impact. But for the longest, I said no, because I was like, I don't know really what that position is going to look like for me. And it took the actual President Ron for talking with me and sharing with me and then showing me like, hey, no, this is really what it kind of looks like. And I was like, wait a minute, I totally see where I can serve in this capacity, as well as with the Black Men Coalition, serving as a mentor within the schools. At one point I thought, these, kids are going to make fun of me and for whatever reason, and I'm going to be too shy to do that. But through going with another mentor and then showing me, hey, this is actually what it looks like, it helps kind of build that confidence. Like, okay, I can serve in this capacity.
I wanted, before we finish up here, we have like 7 minutes left. You kind of touched on it a little bit, Temwa, in your comment, but how do you step back from a commitment? You've decided this is what I'm passionate about. I'm going to volunteer with this organization. You volunteer with it for years, maybe, or maybe not as long, but how do you step back? Because you still see the need, that organization or whatever it is has a need for you or for volunteers. How do you know when it's time to step back? And then how do you do that?
You don't. You're committed for life now. No,
you just keep adding more things.
Just keep adding more things. I think it also depends on where you're at, right? If you feel like you're ready, and but along that process, who did you maybe mentor along the way, right? And also allowing, the best way I could put it, it's like allowing your baby to go and grow up. Because sometimes you feel like, you know what, if I let go, everything will kind of crumble. So I think having that inside trust and confidence that you've served very well. You have a great blueprint from another leader to maybe pick up on. That it's time to maybe you can step away from that. But that doesn't mean you just are gone. You can still also mentor the next leadership along the way too.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the when is you probably already know. So it's when you start to dread the thing that it is you volunteered to do, and you're just going through the motions and not bringing the same level of energy and excitement that you originally did. And I feel like we see it a lot, and we see it a lot on both normal, maybe volunteering, but also on those boards and commissions and committees that maybe don't have terms. So like there's not an easy out. You just feel like you just had as Tim was said, a lifetime assignment. So I do think kind of before you get involved, maybe have those conversations of what the expectations are and what that term maybe looks like. And then also as you're feeling yourself start to maybe be a little tired in that role, again, have communications with leadership. Like, what does that look like? How can you best prepare them to bring in that next person, whether it is through a mentoring, or maybe they already have someone in mind and they've just been waiting for you to say, I am ready to be done. And you didn't even know that until you have that conversation. So just start to talk. Like, we talk a lot about succession planning. It's not just for businesses. Like, it applies everywhere. Let's create that kind of continuous conversation. At some point, all of us are going to be done in whatever we're currently doing. So what does that look like on who's next?
And I think for me, yes, as Liesl had said, you do know, but then it's how do you convince yourself that, yes, I'm going to let my child go off into the big wide world. And I will tell myself that I am opening up an opportunity for another person in the community to be able to give back in that same way, and an opportunity for that nonprofit organization to gain new perspective and knowledge and experience from someone else. And so I just have to say, this is really me opening it up an opportunity that I was basically taking up. And again, if I'm dreading going to those meetings, then it's not doing anybody any good. So that's usually how I'll step away.
That's a good way of framing it instead of you're quitting. Like, I'm making room for someone else.
Yeah.
I personally had a hard time with this. I was president of the local Van Meter Soccer Club I got volunteered into this role early, and then I did it for a long time, helped build much bigger club, and was doing a lot of different, everything from grounds work to all of these different things. And I realized I wasn't really practicing what we preach, and also I was things got stagnant. I had done a lot of those things, and new ideas weren't coming in. And so I was like, yeah, it's probably time. My kids are getting older too, and they're not in the club anymore, and they're not even part of it. I'm still doing this stuff, and then I'm like not personally invested. So how do I, bring that next generation, next new ideas into the role? And you have to have that succession and recruit your successor to do that. But I'm of the believer that it's not a matter of stepping away from volunteering. It's a matter of stepping away from that role. How do I bring my energy to something new that excites me, and something new that I can use my skills for that could make the most difference? And I think the best way to step away from is to find that new role that you can make an even bigger impact.
Yeah. So much good advice here. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank our panelists for participating in this discussion. You brought valuable insight to the issue, and I hope you've inspired thought and conversation. I definitely have learned a lot from this, so thank you personally from me. Thank you also to our audience for their attention and participation, and thanks finally to ITC Midwest, the presenting sponsor of Iowa Ideas, as well as our session sponsors, UFG and Cedar Rapids Bank and Trust. And this session has been recorded, and it will be available at iowaideas.com, so you can continue learning about volunteering or go back and refresh your memory. But thank you to the four of you. I really can't overstate how much I appreciate you spending the time with us and sharing your knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.